Today, we're going to talk about what might be the single most important technological revolution in all of human history, the invention of writing. And no, we're not just talking about letters on a page. We're talking about the exact moment humanity basically created an external brain for itself, a move that would change absolutely everything. I mean, seriously, try to picture it. Every law, every story, every debt you owe, all the knowledge your entire culture has, it all has to live inside someone's head. That's a world where knowledge is unbelievably fragile. History becomes this giant game of telephone, and building any kind of complex society, just not possible. And that's exactly the problem that writing solved. It wasn't just a new way to communicate. Nope. It was our very first hard drive. It finally freed our minds from this massive, overwhelming burden of having to memorize everything. And it lets civilizations store, process, and build on information like never before. All right, so let's get into this. Before we had writing, the complexity of any society was basically capped by what its people could remember collectively. And this wasn't just, an inconvenience, it was a hard biological wall holding back progress. So in a world before literacy, laws weren't written down. They were just customs that could get fuzzy or change from one generation to the next. History was all mixed up with legend. And trying to run a big city, keep track of taxes, or even organize a huge building project, it was a logistical nightmare. Society had pretty much hit its memory limit. So, how did we smash through that wall? Well, the solution, writing, popped up almost at the same time, but independently all across the globe. This tells you it wasn't just some random flash of genius. It was a technological leap that multiple civilizations had to take to solve the same huge problem. And what's so wild about this is just how close these dates are in the grand scheme of things. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and then later in China, the need for a way to store information became so critical that they each invented it from scratch. It was clearly a fundamental step in how societies evolve.
And each system was perfectly suited to its home turf. In Mesopotamia, they had tons of clay, so they used it to make tablets for keeping track of business. In Egypt, hieroglyphs were carved into stone on temples, meant to last for eternity. And in China, they etched script onto turtle shells to talk to the gods. The hardware and the software were completely intertwined.
So what made this brand new technology so essential? What were the original killer apps that made everyone adopt it and completely reshape their worlds? Well, the answer is probably not what you're thinking. Yeah, if you're imagining the first great written works were epic poems or heroic tales, you gotta think again. A whopping 85% of the earliest cuneiform tablets ever found were economic records. That's right, the first killer app for writing was bookkeeping. With writing, rulers could suddenly manage huge empires. They could collect taxes from everyone, count their populations, keep a record of who owned what land, and, this is a big one, create a single set of written laws, like the Code of Hammurabi, that applied to everybody. Bureaucracy was officially born, and it ran on ink and clay. Writing also completely turned the economy on its head. For the very first time, you could have a binding contract with someone you didn't even know. You could keep perfect track of who owed what. This built trust and let massive trade networks blossom, connecting cities that were miles and miles apart. And then, of course, writing let us record culture itself with perfect accuracy. Epic poems, religious texts, the histories of kings, observations of the stars, all of this could now be saved and passed down through generations without getting messed up or forgotten. Knowledge could finally start to pile up. So all these apps didn't just add a few new features to society, they totally rebooted its entire operating system. The effects were huge, changing not just how we lived, but believe it or not, how we actually think. This chart really lays it out, the whole before and after picture. Society suddenly got a stable, verifiable memory. Instead of relying on stories that could change, we could build on a solid foundation of recorded facts. This didn't just change our world, it literally rewired our brains, paving the way for more complex, abstract, and analytical thinking. And that's really the heart of it. By putting information outside of our heads, writing freed up our brains. It gave us the mental bandwidth to start thinking about much bigger ideas, things like philosophy, advanced math, and science. We stopped just trying to remember things, and we started analyzing them. But this revolution also totally shook up society. Since learning to read and write took years of intense training,
a whole new elite class of scribes and priests and officials popped up. These were the people who controlled the flow of information, and because of that, they held an incredible amount of power, creating new social ladders that had never existed before.
So look, this ancient tech isn't just some dusty thing from a history book. It is the foundational operating system that is still running our modern world, thousands of years later. You can draw a straight, unbroken line from those first little wedge shapes pressed into clay to the invention of the alphabet, to the printing press, and all the way to the digital code that's making the internet work right now. It is all part of the exact same story of technological evolution. And that's the real takeaway here. Writing isn't something we left in the past. It's the invisible infrastructure that holds up everything. Our laws, our science, and even the software running on the device you're using to watch this. Which brings us to a pretty mind-bending final thought. For thousands of years, writing has been our main tool for thinking deep thoughts and storing information. But as we move deeper into an age of video, AI, and voice commands, it really makes you wonder, are we in the middle of the next great shift? What's the technology that will one day make writing look as old to us as a clay tablet? What comes next?